This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
Hello, football fans, and welcome to the Onside Kick. My name is Ricky Widmer, and as always, I'm joined by the Mark Weber.
Dub them E's.
And we got some pretty big news here at MVP.
Yeah.
This is like
It's a good day.
Everyone in the comments section, you've got to do it. Right now, you have to congratulate Mark Weber because as of, what was it? Saturday or Sunday? As of Sunday.
Last
Sunday.
To be specific.
Mark is, can we say married man, or is it just a
Well, I didn't.
engaged?
I'm not married yet.
You're going to get married, though, to your girlfriend.
It's a to-be. Well, fiance now.
Fiance now. See,
Yeah.
I've never had this close of a friend get married, so I got to get up on all this lingo.
Yeah, you got to know what's going on. And you got to learn the difference between fiance and fiance, because there are two different words.
One's a guy and
exactly
one's a girl, right?
Yeah, the girl has two E's. The guy has one.
Doesn't ours have an apostrophe, or is that
Both
theirs?
have an accent.
That's what I meant, an accent.
Both get an accent, but for some reason, the lady version has two E's.
So it's fiance and fiance.
When you're talking about your lady fiance, you got to dub them E's.
Yeah, well, Mark always dubs them.
I always dub
It's
them
easy for
E's.
you.
Exactly.
But, I mean, just congratulations, bud.
Thank you.
It's a huge step, and I hope to one day follow in your great footsteps.
We can't all be that lucky, Ricky. We can't all be that lucky.
We all can't be that lucky, and we all can't be that great, dubbing them E's
Exactly.
every time. But we're continuing our divisional preview. Well, I'm continuing. Mark's just jumping on the bandwagon
The good
here
stuff here.
because he missed the AFC North. It's fine. It's only the AFC North. Nothing that Mark really wanted to cry over, but you're jumping onto a good time because now we're continuing with the last North Division on the NFC side. This is how this is going to work. We're going to go through each of the teams, starting with the last place team. So that will be the Chicago Bears. Then we'll go all the way through the divisional rankings, talking about each team. And then at the end, kind of give our divisional predictions for what we think about the division as of right now, recording this podcast. And we're going to start with your Chicago Bears, Mark.
Yeah, good stuff, man.
It's a big, to me, I'm going to say it's a big year for the Bears because you go out there and you add some key pieces. You add Akeem Hicks, defensive tackle from the Patriots. You go out there and add a Danny Trevathan from the Denver Broncos, a Jarrell Freeman from the Colts. You go ahead and draft Leonard Floyd, trading up to go get him in a move that Bears fans were kind of iffy about at first, and it's, to me, we've talked about it before. Rankin's talked about it. This defense is going to be the lead thing to carry this team, and we've talked about this before, and this is the big question mark I think is going to be for the Bears. Two question marks. Number one, is this going to be Alshon Jeffries last year in a Bear uniform? And number two, how are the Bears going to do without Matt Forte, who is now in jet green?
Well, yeah, you're right in the fact that this is going to be back to the good old days of the Chicago Bears.
Monsters of the Midway.
Yeah, exactly. Monsters of the Midway. We're all remembering our 85 Bears out there. So that's what we're shooting for. That's what we're aiming for. And that's what a guy like Danny Trevathan recently talking about why he came to Chicago. That's one of the big reasons why he came to Chicago.
Wasn't because his old head coach is now the head coach here,
John
right?
Fox helps. Vic Fangio helps. Who doesn't want to play with Vic Fangio, especially if you're a linebacker? But he was talking about how he really wanted to be a part of something that that memorable, that big of a legacy. But I also like that he was talking about when the Super Bowl winning Denver Broncos played the Chicago Bears and how the Chicago Bears gave that offense a lot of trouble. And he's like, man, if this team that's not that good can give our good offense that much trouble, I want to be part of that.
Think about what they could do with me, basically.
Exactly. Yeah, what can they do when I'm there, when I'm with Vic Fangio and John Fox again? So it's all about that defense. But to answer some of your questions, you can't let Alshon Jeffrey go anywhere. You just can't do it. And I know that Ryan Pace doesn't like giving out these big contracts. But you can't do it because what just happened today, Ricky?
Alshon first day went and talked.
Well, that too. But the first day of the mandatory minicamps, Marquise Wilson has to leave early. What does this guy do? He gets hurt. He constantly gets hurt. And as long as Alshon Jeffrey's not also constantly getting hurt, because he did get hurt last year, as long as that's not a recurring situation, you got to have this guy. You got to have a number one. Even if he's not the number one and he's the number two because Kevin White's the number one, well, Kevin White's on a rookie contract. We can handle that. We can deal with that because then we can have a number one and a number two that are both solid because Marquise Wilson's not going to be that guy because he just keeps getting hurt.
However, Kevin White, and I know I'm probably jinxing this by saying it, but he's a guy coming off of an injury too. And we don't know if, Bears fans are hoping that he's going to be able to have I'm going to call it a rookie season because he didn't play last year. He's able to come off of that injury and add something. But at the same time, you got to be thinking, man, I hope he doesn't re-injure something.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's the thing that you're kind of nervous about, and that's just yet another reason why Alshon Jeffrey, we need to have this guy around because we need to see what those injury issues are going to be. Is that going to be a problem? Is it going to be, an issue going forward to where Marquise Wilson's always out? Kevin White's always out.
Well, and I mean, Alshon only played 9 games last year.
Exactly.
He was injured too.
So it's just a big mystery because you need those guys. I mean, that's what the Chicago Bears were last year. They could have been a little bit of a better team. I mean, let's not get too excited. They were 6-10 for a reason, but they could have been a little bit better of a team
if Cutler had people to throw to.
Yeah, he's throwing to a bunch of scrubs that he has no idea. I mean, that's basically what Cutler's done his entire career, throw to scrubs. And this year we don't have, Matt Forte out there as the safety blanket. We also don't have Martellus Bennett to be a safety blanket. Jay Cutler liked him a lot. So it's going to be interesting. But also to get to not having Matt Forte, it's the gamble. You got to try and aim it to see, do we have more years out of this guy or is this decline going to start? You want to sell high on a guy that's doing well, get out of there. And I don't know for sure if it's going to really be a sharp decline with Matt Forte over in New York. I think he'll be fine, but I don't necessarily disagree with saying, all right, at some point you do have to move on. Well, let's do it.
The way I kind of see it was that Matt Forte, to me, you could tell that his time in Chicago was going to end sooner rather than later, because one of the big things that we would always hear, you would always say, Brandon would always say, even Sean would say it, all you Bears fans, is it kind of seemed like Matt Forte had a lot to complain about, where it was kind of like, I don't like how they're using me in the offense, but I'm going to do it anyways.
Yeah.
I want to be
a rusher,
that was a
not a
pass
theme.
catcher.
Every year, Matt Forte had something to complain about.
And it's eventually where it's like, fuck it. You know what? We're just going to get rid of you, and we'll have this young kid, Langford, come in. He might not be as good as you, but at least he doesn't complain.
And you even have, every year it seems like at least lately, the Bears have been going and getting running backs in the draft and getting guys
they got one
to
this
try
year
and
too,
be
in
committee.
Howard.
Yep, exactly. Getting guys to try and be that running back by committee. I don't know if it's going to be a thing in New York if Matt Forte is going to keep talking, but he's an interesting guy because every year he talks and every year he complains, but then he goes out there and he plays. And he just gets over it.
However, in New York, and I know this is a little off topic, but I'm going to bring it up anyways, is do you think being back with a guy like Brandon Marshall, who they were on the same team together, could help?
I don't know if it would help or not because he was in Chicago for such a long time with a lot of great players and still found something to complain about. So, I don't know. Maybe it was just all that time around Lance Briggs because he did the same thing back in the day.
Briggs liked to complain too, but it was Jordan Howard who I was talking about, the running back out of Indiana. The Bears even got this year. But to go back, I want to go back to Alshon a little bit because I want to read the comments that he said today when he was asked, because the two sides, him and Pace and the Bears, have until July 15th. That's the deadline to get a deal done before it's like, fuck it, you're either signing the tender or you're a free agent. What he said today was a long-term deal is the goal, but that's between Pace and my agent. It really doesn't matter to me. Like I said, that situation will take care of itself. I'm here to play football and to focus on football. And the big thing for Alshon, just as a player, I'm not saying him for the Bears, just him for himself. The big thing he needs to do this year is stay healthy.
For sure.
Because if he's not able, him and the Bears aren't able to get a deal done, if he's going to go somewhere else, and I kind of feel weird, we're in a preview setting, and I'm already talking about the guy maybe leaving, but if he goes to leave, he's got to be able to say, hey, I played all 16 games.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to go, because you're not going to get that big contract, and then you might as well have stayed and gotten whatever you could have. But this is the same situation that I look at to talk about, once again, the Super Bowl champions, the Denver Broncos. I view it not exactly the same caliber, but the same situation as Von Miller. We know the deal's going to get done. We know it's going to happen. We just got to wait and be patient. It's probably going to be last minute. This is something I feel very confident that Ryan Pace and Alshon Jeffrey, his camp, they're going to get this deal done because they have to. Just like the Denver Broncos, they can't lose Von Miller. The Chicago Bears cannot lose Alshon Jeffrey. We went years and years and years without a reliable target out there.
Here's the question. Does Kevin White's performance this year, is it one of those things where if Kevin White performs out of his mind, can you as a Bears fan then say, well, okay, Alshon can walk because Kevin White can be the number one now, based off of what we saw this season? That is if he performs well his first year in the NFL.
The reason I'd say no to that really is because, like I said, Marquise Wilson keeps getting hurt. He's never reliable out there. Eddie Royal, the guy we brought in to be like that number 3 option, he wasn't very reliable. He was getting hurt as well.
You don't have Martellus Bennett anymore. Zach Miller's your number 1
also
for at least this year.
Injury issues. So you have a lot of guys out there who might, there's no guarantee they're going to be there for 16 games. And then I'm also looking to the future of eventually Chicago's going to have a young quarterback because Brian Hoyer's not the guy who's going to do it. Jay Cutler's old. He's at the end of his career. Eventually, we're going to have a young quarterback coming in. I want to have some good targets for him to throw the ball to. I don't want to have to go through Blake Bortles for a few years of he's bad, he's bad, he's bad. Oh, now that we gave him some options, he's good.
When he's got the 2 Robinsons,
exactly.
Or the 2 Allens out there.
When you give a young quarterback options, suddenly he looks great. I don't want to be the situation where this young quarterback doesn't have anybody to throw the ball to, because that's just going to be a recipe for disaster, recipe for continuing to draft quarterbacks, much like the Cleveland Browns. I don't want to be involved with that.
And that's another thing. You bring up Jay Cutler. The thing that we got to look at from his aspect is you guys don't have, we talked about, I mentioned some of the losses you had as players, but Adam Gase, however you say it, I'm not a Bears fan. I don't know how to do these things. Adam Gase, I believe it is, he's now in Miami. So you have a new offensive coordinator, and you got Loggins that's now in there, Dowell Loggins, who is now the offensive coordinator. And I mean, I'm hearing things like, okay, this is going to be a good relationship between him and Jay, because the way it was described today on, I can't remember, I think it was the beat writer for ESPN for the Chicago Bears, was on Waddle and Sylvie. And the way he described it was, it's kind of going to be a relationship that Jay Cutler and Mike Martz had, except Jay Cutler isn't going to hate Loggins like he hated Mike Martz. It's going to be one of those things where these guys are comfortable with each other, where Loggins won't be afraid to call out Jay. Jay won't be afraid to call out Loggins or anybody on the offense. And I hear that and I go, okay, I don't know how I feel about a quarterback calling out a coach, but at the same time, if this works for Jay, it could be a happy marriage.
Yeah, I think they're trying to get that relationship that a guy like Bill Belichick has with a Tom Brady. And I know that's not an offense coordinator there, but they want to get that kind of coach.
Or like a Coach Daniels.
Yeah. You want to have some synergy between your coach and your quarterback here. So you want them to have that great relationship. And Jay has this history with him already. They've already established that. So it's good, and we're not building anything new. It's the same system we used last year offensively with minor tweaks here and there. Nothing's going to be different. They're going to be treating Jay Cutler the exact same way. I really don't see much changing. I see more of what we saw last year, conservative play. It might be a little bit more oriented towards the pass just because Matt Forte's not there, and Alshon Jeffrey and Kevin White hopefully will be there. But I definitely
will be there.
Yeah, I definitely don't think it's going to be much anything different than what we saw before.
Well, and it's like the quote that Jay said earlier today, Tuesday, as we're recording this podcast. He said he's not afraid, he being Loggins. He's not afraid to tell me when I'm completely wrong, and rightfully so. I like to tell him whenever I think we're not doing things right or we need to change things, end quote. And to me, this season for the Bears, kind of in a nutshell, before we kind of move on to the factory of sadness in the NFC North. We talked about the real one last week. We're getting to the one in the NFC
The satellite
North,
plant.
The satellite plant. But the way I see this Bears team is the defense is going to be phenomenal. The defense is going to carry this team. It's just going to be, how can the offense perform? Is the offense going to be bad and you don't make the playoffs, decent and you make the playoffs because you got a defense that got you there, and then, or could it be great and this team goes far into the playoffs because not only do they have a great defense, but the offense played great?
Yeah, if this defense, which currently is the most undervalued defense right now, but I think people are catching on to it. People are definitely catching on to the Chicago Bears. But right now it's kind of a very underrated defense because of that linebacking group that we have. People aren't quite giving them the credit. The pass rushers are there now. They're going to get this team pretty far. I mean, they're going to get this team pretty far on their own. All Jay Cutler has to do is what he did last year, but with better options, with better weapons. Because the Chicago Bears were right there in so many games. So many games they could have turned it around. They could have won. They just needed that playmaker there to make it happen. And that's what Jay Cutler needs. That's what he has Kevin White and Alshon Jeffrey there for. If that works, if those guys are, right on it, they're in sync, this team will surprise a lot of people. I just keep saying, John Fox likes to take his teams to the Super Bowl in the second year. Super Bowl, Super Bears, I don't know. I'm just going to say. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just putting out there that things happen sometimes.
You got to have some confidence in your team, right?
Hey, Chicago Bears fans always have confidence.
Until something doesn't go right.
And then everyone tries to get Jay Cutler out of town.
Yeah, that's basically what happens. But we're going to move on to the Lions now. They finished third in the division last year, right in front of the Chicago Bears. And kind of going through the free agent tracker on ESPN, how the offseason has fared for the Lions. Some of the key losses is you've got the safety, Abdullah Quadis. He's now in Miami. Manny Ramirez, we didn't mention him. He is now with the Chicago Bears. And we've got Travis Lewis, who is now with my Minnesota Vikings. You can also throw in
although Ramirez is done. He's retired, I believe.
He's one of the things where he did go to the Bears. But point is, he's not with the Lions anymore. And then their big free agent signings have been, you've got Jeff Schwartz. He got cut by the Giants, picked up by the Lions. Stephen Charles, the defensive tackle coming in from Buffalo, and the biggest being Marvin Jones, the wide receiver. I'm also going to throw in Stephen Ridley, who comes over from the Jets. And the way I see this Lions team is there's one big thing I did not mention in that free agency kind of rundown, and it's because it wasn't a free agent move. The big thing the Lions have to deal with this year is they got to move on from Calvin Johnson because he retired this offseason. He's not going to be in a Detroit uniform.
And that's a hard thing to move on from.
It's one of those things where it's like you had arguably the best wide receiver in the game. And now he's not.
For years you had him. And now you don't have much going on. I mean, obviously Golden Tate did well. Golden Tate did well, though, because he was opposite Calvin Johnson.
But now he's the number one.
Yeah, and Golden Tate's not a number one option. I'm sorry, he's just not. So it's going to be interesting for Detroit. They have a decent team. There's not really anything that's glaringly wrong with this team. They made a lot of draft picks and a lot of pretty good draft picks as well. But they just don't. This was a team that was used to having that explosive weapon. Calvin Johnson saved this team so many times. And now it's not there. And Matthew Stafford has been looking like, he was the beneficiary of Calvin Johnson. Calvin Johnson was not the beneficiary of Matthew Stafford. So without that weapon there, I don't know. Matthew Stafford's not looking like he's going to have that great of a season.
Well, and they're kind of, and I say they as the Lions, they're kind of looking at this, and based off their moves, it's, to me, a hard reaction to that retirement from Calvin Johnson. Because, I mean, I look at their draft, and they didn't draft any wide receivers, but if you look at free agency, they got Marvin Jones to come in, who, to me, I'm sitting there going, okay, can he be as good in Detroit as he was in Cincinnati, or was he only as good in Cincinnati because he had the Wolverine Hugh Jackson as his offensive coordinator and Andy Dalton as his quarterback? Also, you have A.J. Green on one side of the field. That's going to take some attention off of you each game, but they also go out and sign Andre Roberts, and as of today, they hosted Anquan Bolden and could bring Bolden in.
But Anquan Bolden's just been moving around from place to place lately.
But he could be a stopgap for this year. I'm not saying he's going to be anything great, but he's a veteran presence just for a year. There.
I really do wonder if this will be the first time Matthew Stafford has played 16 games and will be under 4,000 yards. Just because he doesn't have Calvin Johnson. I mean, Calvin Johnson's the number one target. He doesn't have anyone as reliable as that. He's got these improved defenses that he's facing now in his own division.
Bears, Vikings. I mean, the Packers are going to be the easiest division he faces.
Defense, yeah.
Defense, that's what I meant.
So I don't know. It's just going to be interesting to see. I'm very interested to see what he does this year, just because I really expected the Detroit Lions to try and get a replacement for Calvin Johnson in the draft. It didn't happen, which isn't a bad thing because they had a lot of areas that needed some help.
I think it came down to also is they took Taylor Decker, number one. They could have taken Laquan Treadwell.
Yeah.
He was the guy I thought if he was there, Lions take him.
It made sense.
Lions take him, make him the next. I didn't mean to run there, but make him the next Calvin Johnson. I mean, I'm happy that didn't happen because now he's wearing the purple and gold for my team. But, yeah, they thought of, no matter what, they did the right thing with that first overall pick because it's either let's give Stafford a weapon or protect him.
Yeah.
And they chose to protect him.
And they did a lot. I mean, they also drafted a center. Later on in the draft, they went for a guard, too. So they're definitely trying to get some depth there. They're trying to bolster up that line, which needs help. Matthew Stafford needs the support there. It's just you can't ignore how big of an effect losing the best wide receiver in the game, if not the second best. Some people want to put someone else like OBJ over him.
I just don't think it's going to be this is not going to be a good year for the Lions. Not because it's not like usual when I think, oh, well, the Lions suck. They're not going to go anywhere. It's just going to be, I don't think this team got good enough this offseason to compete with the division champion Vikings, the Packers who now get Jordy Nelson back, and the Bears who look like they're improving overnight.
Oh, for sure. This was a team that really kind of turned it on late in the season last year. At the beginning, they did not do very well at all. So I don't really know. I don't know if that's going to be something that kind of continues. I don't know if that was saying that there's a locker room issue that got fixed. You know, they did play hard teams. They did play the Denver Broncos, the Seattle Seahawks, the Arizona Cardinals last year, all in that stretch. So they played difficult teams, but it'll be interesting to see what happened. They definitely let up quite a large amount of points defensively last year. They let teams walk pretty much all over them. Giving up an average of 22 last year. An average of 25 last year. Not very good. You're not excited about that, but they definitely tried hard to replace some of those things.
And I mean, I'm looking at their schedule right now. They've got some tough stretches.
The whole NFC North is tough.
Well, and the way I see it is there's two stretches I'm looking at. Number one, week 7 through week 9, you got to play at home the Redskins, who the Redskins could be a good team this year, even though I think Kirk Cousins isn't for real. Then in week 8, you're playing at Houston, who's going to be a better team with Brock the Cock and Lamar Miller in the backfield. Then week 9, you go to Minnesota. Then if we jump 14 through 17, home against Chicago, at the Giants, at the Cowboys, and then home against the Packers. Those two divisional games are going to be tough because it's the Bears and the Packers. And then you got to play the Cowboys who, yes, they've got to stay healthy for it to be a tough game.
But this should be a good team.
And the Giants, both of which, like the Giants, I would give the Lions the edge early on.
But the Giants are going to be the real test of how's that defense improved.
But you got to play them in the Meadowlands. That's my thing.
And this is, Ben McAdoo's team is going to be almost like the run and shoot kind of, air attack kind of college team out there. They're just going to throw the ball all over you because that's what they did really well last year. Mm-hmm. And there's no reason why they're going to stop doing that. So that's going to, unfortunately, it's late in the season. You'd like to see them get tested early. But that's going to be a really strong test at how has this team improved defensively, because that's something that they needed to do.
And the one thing I also don't like if I'm a Lions fan is of your first 4 games, 3 of which are on the road, 2 against the Bears and the Packers. Your home game is against Tennessee. You could probably win that game. But you got to start the year off in Indy, where Andrew Luck is going to be healthy for that one.
Yeah.
Unless he gets injured in the preseason, which I hope he doesn't.
Do you think Andrew Luck has to turn it around? You think he's got to get back to normal? So I don't know. It's going to be interesting, too. I mentioned how last season the Detroit Lions had that slow start. With all the changes that they had in various coaching positions and front office positions in January, it's interesting to see if that takes a little bit of time to gel once again. And unfortunately, we were just talking about the schedule, but unfortunately for the Lions, if they get off to a slow start, it doesn't get better. The season doesn't get easier. It gets only more difficult from there. You would say the arguably easier games all happen in October. And that's not something you want to rely on if you had a team that had a late start and had a lot of changes this year.
And this goes for all the schedules for the NFC North this year. How their schedule is constructed is you have to play your division. Of course you do. But the AFC division that every single NFC North team has to play is the AFC South. So that means every single team, the Bears, Lions, Packers, and Vikings, are going to see Colts, Titans, Jags, and Texans, which is tough enough because the Jags are improved, the Titans are a little bit improved, and then you got the 2 top guys in the Colts and the Texans. But then you also have to play the NFC East, where, yeah, the Eagles could be an easy game this year. Redskins were hot last year. Cowboys are going to be healthy this year, and we'll see what the Giants can do with McAdoo as the head coach.
I really look at this schedule, and the only thing, not to get too far into the schedule, but the only games I see that are like easier games.
The Rams.
That's literally the only
it's a home
easier game.
too.
Yeah, that's the only game where I sit there and go, all right, feel pretty good about that one. Everything else, I'm like, it's at least a toss-up. We're a game like the Titans. Yes, I'm going to give the Lions the edge against the Titans most likely, but it's still a toss-up. Still a toss-up for sure.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, Lion fans, I don't want to feel like I'm just ragging on your team.
I'm not saying you guys are going to go 0-16 again.
Oh, we don't want to hear that. Sean in the opening to his Lions preview kind of talked about how depressed he was when the 0-16 season happened with being the Lions fan.
Oh, it was great.
The Lions fan that he was acting like he was. Oh, it's a great opening. You got to go check out his Lions preview. And it was great for you and me only because we're Bear and Viking fans.
Yeah, it's wonderful when the Detroit Lions go 0-16. If they could do it again, I'd be thrilled.